And hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Sasquatch Secrets under the new name. I'm so glad you could all make it and are here to support me. I really appreciate it. And we've got a good show for you tonight. I've got some outstanding guests and got a lot of stuff to go over, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. So let me start to bring on my guests. And I see you, chat. You are mwah, love you guys so much, but we're going to get right into things. And I hope you like the new look of Sasquatch Secrets. And I hope to tell you all those secrets. So let us bring on our first guest. Hello, Mr. Buckwas.
Well, hello, Nikki. Thank you for the invite. Boy, I don't get a welcome like that when I come home half the time.
I had to make you something special.
That was it wasn't the pipe and a searchlight though, but yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, Thomas has a new one as well, and but so glad you could be here to talk about the many names of Sasquatch, and
there are many.
There are many. I had to pick and choose out of thousands, you guys, and it took me a while to put this together, but I hope you all enjoy it. And let's bring on you know who. Hello, Thomas.
Hello.
Welcome aboard.
Hi.
Ready for duty, as usual.
Sasquatch Secrets. So this does mean hairy man hoaxes and hoodwinks doesn't exist anymore?
Exactly. Yep, it sure does. I retired hairy man. I was tired of getting called a dude in chats. And, people really weren't searching up a hairy man. We're getting different searches. So I thought it was probably now the time that, I have a really great following that I could go ahead and make that change. Hopefully I can get searched up better with that.
Can you imagine somebody in Google actually looking that up? Now, where can I find a hairy man?
And I told everybody I don't want those men on my show.
Right,
so the ones who do want to search that. Anyway, so glad you could be here, Thomas. And let's bring in my next guest. Mr. Bill Reed, welcome.
Well, thank you. How you guys doing today?
Good, good. I'm glad you could be here to join us. And everybody, I have invited Thomas. I don't know where he is, but he'll get scolded.
Right here.
I mean, Leon. Sorry, Leon. Leon will get scolded for not being here. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It's going to be a great conversation. Let me get us in the right place. There we go. Indigenous Bigfoot. The topic for tonight, the many names of Sasquatch. And oh my Lord, there was a lot. And many tribes or bands had even several names, so I did go with oh my gosh, of course I get a phone call. One moment, I have to take this.
We'll talk among ourselves.
Well, while we're waiting for Nikki to get off the phone, we shall have the new Sasquatch Secrets, in which Nikki has been overthrown. We'll now continue on with the new government, the government of Bookwash Crew.
Yeah, the hairy man got the heave-ho.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all she wrote. How are you doing, Bill?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad. It's funny. I have a little bit of a rant about the indigenous Bigfoot names in a bit when we start the show.
Same here.
Who rants?
Okay, sorry, gentlemen. I had to. That was actually important. So I'm gonna go through my little spiel here, and then we're gonna get started right away. Let me make sure I can see the chat going. Sandra, John Ayers, Grasshopper. Good to see everybody in the chat. So tonight, the world has had this long-held fascination with the creatures like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Yeti. The entry goes back all the way back to the 1950s when our own four horsemen, John Green, Rene DeHinden, Grover Krantz, Peter Byrne, made significant impact in the Bigfoot community. And the famous footage by Roger Patterson, and Patty, it was really built up and has a big Bigfoot hype. Even though it was a kind of grainy, slightly blurry picture depicting this hairy mammal walking upright and vanishing into the forest, it captivated imaginations everywhere and got many people started in the search for Bigfoot or to see it again. So the Bigfoot phenomena has since captivated paranormal groups, and all types of media alike. And Leon says he'll be right here. However, oh my God, Leon. It's like, okay, we'll see you in a minute. It often goes unnoticed that society is that this creature is not a recent discovery, that indigenous communities across the world have had interactions with these beings for centuries, often associating them with natural or spiritual phenomena. These tribal beliefs are based on actual encounters or mystical perceptions of natural spirits. I hope to explore some small section of those names that were given to these creatures. So different tribes portray Bigfoot as an enigmatic entity veiled in power and magic. Sometimes he is perceived as an aggressive and rough, while other times he is seen as a benevolent ally among the tribes. So general descriptions vary, encompassing a hairy creature with hair colors ranging from gray, white, black, brown, or even red. They reported to be between 7 to 10 feet or more, weighing anywhere from 300 to 900 pounds of pure muscle and possessing a howl that sends shivers down one's spine. So Bigfoot is frequently encountered in deep forest areas close to water sources, food, and natural shelters. Tribes assign names to these beasts based on its characteristics and physical attributes. And that's where we're going to go. We are going to head to our first name, which is the Buckwas, of course. The Wildmen of the Woods. Okay, now it's time for you to say the name.
Are you talking about the First Nation name?
The First Nation name.
It's actually Klak-Klak-Awak.
Klak-Klak-Awak.
Yeah. I learned that from C-Word, who made us all on Operation Sea Monkey say it about 100 times each so we could get it right.
I got a lot of them as I was going through all these, but that one was definitely a challenge.
Just in general, before we really get into the specifics, one has to be very careful when looking back into the First Nation oral and traditional stories of anything to do with the Sasquatch, because of a lot of names that have been attributed to First Nation source weren't First Nation source at all. But people tend to romanticize things. example of that is the Mountain Devil, Mount St. Helens. You've all heard it. It's an
Mhm.
old Indian name for the Sasquatch or the Mountain Devil. And I always found that rather odd, since they had no concept of the devil before they ran into the Europeans. So obviously that's not true. There's an excellent book by Henry S. Sharp, The Transformation of Bigfoot, published in the early 1980s, about the Chippewayan First Nation in northern Saskatchewan. People say, well, of course there's got to be Sasquatch in North Saskatchewan. The Chippewayan First Nations know about it. Well, yeah. And Henry S. Sharp discovered in his studies, they started talking about it around 1960, 61, because the First Nations, they have televisions, they have radio, they listen and watch both. And one of the first things that made him suspicious was the Chippewayan quite often used the American term Bigfoot all the time. He thought, why is that? Because there are a lot of so-called oral history and tradition is very adaptable. So people hear this, they say, oh, this probably goes back centuries. No, it goes back to the 1950s and 60s when basically Sasquatch and Bigfoot became popular in the general public in general. But there are historical counts in First Nations going all the way back. The word Sasquatch itself was a misspelling and a mispronunciation of the Stahelis word Saskats. The best way to pronounce that is take the word basket, drop the B and add SAS to it. He wrote his article for Maclean's magazine in 1929, and he misspelled and mispronounced the name. He called it Sasquatch. It's been known as Sasquatch in Canada ever since. But get back to Coatl, the Klak-Klak-Ewak. Everyone likes to pronounce it Coatl. That is wrong. It's Klak-Klak-Ewak. And the Bookwas. Well, a lot of historical people tell you that the word Sonequa is the female and Bookwas is the male. And when a lot of them are, trade that up, but they also argue with each other. And a lot of the First Nations, I've noticed, they don't like each other very much. So a lot of them claim they're the first to come out with it, but the other ones say they're the first to come out with it. And there's even argument over the word where the word Sasquatch first came out. I mean, all of them wanted to be the one to say they're the ones that coined the term. But Bookwas is basically, and if you go by a lot of oral history and in the Sasquatch community as a whole, afterwards, they claim that's the male and the Seneca is the female. Well, in some cases, according to some First Nations, that's true, and others it's not. They're just two different names by two different First Nations about the same thing. And the big difference is in Sonequa, like if you look at the storyboards and the totem poles, Sonequa is always, you always know because she has whistling lips. Whereas Bookwas always has a real grin on his face. Yeah. So that was basically the difference. But both were basically things that you respected and you avoided if you could.
Yeah.
According to their traditions and oral history,
yeah. Well, the reason I put that on our little group, the Bookwas mask, is an actual sketch. It's a picture of the mask that I've reformed into a sketch. So it's an actual item that's in a museum up the coast. It's a cedar mask that they wear during ceremonies. So I wanted to be as sort of authentic as possible with the subject. Right. And that's where the logo came from for the Bookwas crew. It's from this cedar mask. If you go Google cedar mask or Bookwas, there's hundreds of pictures of.
Yes.
But you'll notice every one of Bookwas, he's always got that bright smile and sort of grin on his face.
Yes. Yeah, it did. They did. They were they're very intimidating, actually, some of them. And, but it was still really interesting to see the whole gamut that they had there. I mean, they made a lot of references to the ghost world, and what was the other one? The mists, the Sunika and the father of her children, and you know, there's a lot to do, and I know I couldn't possibly go through all of them for this round, but it was said that the wild man of the woods, that he eats ghost food out of cockle shells and tries to offer this to living humans who are stranded in the woods, and in order to bring them over to the ghost world, if the humans were to eat this food, it would turn them into a being like the book was. So I
never heard that one before.
And see, that's the issue, Nikki, is so much of the legend, early research in Sasquatch, like John Green, and a lot of times people think that I'm dissing John Green, and I'm not. But a lot of those researchers took the anglicized version of myths and twisted them to fit their story. You know, one of my favorite is the Janoskwa. When you look at the early Ojibwe discussions about them, they are a stone giant. There's absolutely nothing Sasquatch related about them, and even an early wood carving, which I think was around 1600s, shows a 12-foot giant with wearing basically the same clothes as an Iroquois, any of the Iroquoian group would wear, having a club, and they were known to have clubs. And depending upon the legend, they were either had stone skin, or some said that they would roll themselves in pitch and then roll in sand, so they'd have a stone covering that made them invulnerable to weapons. So again, it has nothing to do with Sasquatch, but we've twisted them into now a Sasquatch legend. Even the Chehalis here, they had a legend of a giant group that they battled with, and they eventually defeated, and that group retreated onto top of Morris Mountain, and occasionally you can see the fires that they light up on the mountain. And again, some of this stuff is we've now twisted it into Sasquatch legends, and they're not the same. And you know, and you can see that time and time again. And unfortunately, here in large portions of Canada, and I would assume, you know, in the part of the U.S. as well, they have lost their traditional stories because of like things in Canada. We had the residential schools and other such things where the governments attempted to break the early cultures of the Indigenous people. A lot of those true myths are lost, and some we really don't know if what we're talking about now is a traditional version of the story or one that came about. You know, here in Canada, we had a thing loosely known as pan-Indianism, which was basically the 1930s, where sort of a cultural revolution happened, where they started many bands tried to get back their roots. And part of that is a lot of the myths and legends really only reach back to that time.
If I can speak to that just for a second, because I always wondered about who was doing the translation of these names. Indigenous tribes and, you know, other bands, they've been known to make up derogatory references towards other tribes and bands, shall we say, as a matter of disrespect and I guess belittling the importance of the other band, like stickmen, hairy ones, cannibal giants. You know, are they talking about Bigfoot, or are they just talking about the band further down the river that they don't particularly like?
Well, example, like the word Eskimo, you know, that, you know, and I know in the States it's still a little more prevalent than in Canada, and it's not used much up here. But originally, the term Eskimo, if I remember correctly, was either an Athabascan or a Dene word that was an insulting term to the Inuit group, and it first came about when a group of Europeans were being led by, I can't remember if it was an Athabascan or a Dene guide, and they came upon Inuit village, and the guide tried to get the Europeans to attack the village, and he called them Eskimo, which basically was the eaters of raw flesh or eaters of raw meat, and it was a very derogatory term. And then, of course, the Europeans thought, okay, they're Eskimo. So how many other terms do we have that have come from misunderstandings like that?
Exactly.
Oh, thousands, I bet you. Thousands. It's very high.
Yeah, and we're still doing it today. A more recent in the recent years, I've seen a lot of people in the Sasquatch field take an old First Nation legend, the Wendigo, and try to associate it with Sasquatch, whereas actual fact, the Wendigo's got nothing to do with the Sasquatch. It's a completely different being.
And with that, we have a quote unquote researcher here in BC that claims Wendigo with an I is a cannibal spirit. Wendigo spelled with an E is a Sasquatch, which is absolute nonsense. And it's
then I found one with the A, Wendigo. I found they were all three.
Yeah, and when I challenged her on that and said, if you look at primary sources, because that's where you have to go back, is try to go back as far back as you can to primary sources. And sometimes it's early ethnologers, sometimes it's Jesuits, there's all different ones. Try to get as far back as you can to see what they're saying. And when it comes to the Wendigo, it's clear it's a cannibal spirit. And it's clear that the different spellings are just regional differences. It's like my name, Reed, R-E-I-D. It's also spelled, a half a dozen different ways. And it's just because when they first started writing, they spelled them differently.
And the same went with Bookwas. I found Backwas, Bookwas, Bookwas, and Bookwees. Yeah. There were 4 different spellings for that. And so, it was like, whoa, I have to either I acknowledge all of them on my list here, or I just, say, hey, there are many references to the name spelled different ways depending on where you're searching. If you're searching on Google or Bing or wherever, they're different. They're coming up different too, depending on who wrote it. So
and even people you agree, like the Wendigo. If you look at early, and you're talking about Iroquois, the Woodlands group of Indians, whether it's Iroquois and Ojibwe, that sort of thing. When they're talking about the Wendigo, there is variation between tribes, and in some of them, it is an evil human that becomes possessed by the Wendigo spirit to become a Wendigo. In others, it's a spirit entity, almost like what we would consider a demon. And in some others, it is a transformation that a very evil person can come into. Slight variations, but when you look at all 3 of them, you can see they're close enough to come from the same myth. And that's what we have to remember is when we're talking about trying to go back 1,000, 1,500, even 500 years, the generational gap is so long that we really don't know in many cases, what the original myth was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it could be very confusing just for the fact that almost every band of every tribe practically has a different name for the creature, or what is supposed to be a name for the creature. I mean, Stolo has Sasquatch, the Bella Coola has Boggs, and it's who had it first and who came up with it first, and are they talking about the same subject? So it's very confusing.
Right. And then you've got the white man who comes and hears them say it, and then they pronounce it however they want to, and it may not look anything close to how you say it to what is they wrote down.
And he romanticized it a lot too,
Mm-hmm.
saying this means this when it actually didn't mean anything of the sort. It was just a name.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
See, here in our comments, we have a perfect
Ridiculous.
example. You have the Bigfoot Atheist Inquiry going, Bill, I was told Wendigo was a cannibal spirit that was told me by a Seneca elder. Great. But that is only one of the 3 popular versions from different bands.
Right.
And that elder, like my area study back in the ancient days in the 80s, when I went to university, my study was the Aboriginals of North America with a special on the Aboriginals of Canada. And this is what yes, I'm 40 years away from that and I haven't worked a day in the field, but it's still, I remember a lot of those, what we considered primary sources at the time. And you can see that very similar, like bands, even when they have the same name for a creature or a myth, there can be slight regional differences between them. And again, you could have the Seneca, that Senecan elder. He may be absolutely correct for his tribe or his band's myth. That might be exactly it. But you go down to a neighboring tribe, and it might be slightly different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what I was finding, is that the more I looked into the tribe, and then they broke it down into bands. And there was even a couple of cases where they even speak different language. They may have the same root language, but there was still differences there. So stories are just going to be different per band, per tribes, but even though these tribes were all next to each other, they're going to be quite different in their storytelling or their beliefs and how that got actually wrote down. Because saying it verbally, it's not translating onto paper,
And the other thing that a lot of people misunderstand is they think that Indigenous oral tradition is the same as written accounts, and it's not. Now, there were some bands or some tribes that did have an oral history where the words were unchanged for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Like I believe the Navajo had special storytellers that spent years learning the stories word for word, and they never changed. But that was the minority of tribes. Most tribes didn't have that. Most of their oral history was the same as European oral history, same as we have in now, where it's just told from one to the other. So it did change over the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that people also forget or may not know is that north of Mexico, when you talk about a political structure, the indigenous groups of North America, north of Mexico, did not even achieve the level of political sophistication of a chieftain. The exception was on the Northwest Coast groups here. They became a true chieftain, and some of the Iroquoian groups may have had a true chieftain. But most of the groups that were here, they were more at the band level, which was more like a loose confederation or family, close group of individuals that lived, it would be in a village or nomadic, and they were part of a larger group, but they did not even have the true chiefdom politically. So again, we're trying to take our structure and put it back into a people that didn't have that structure.
Yeah. I'm going to bring in our next guest real quick. Hello, Leon. Welcome. Uh-oh. I got feedback.
I don't think it's me. Hold on.
Hello?
Leon did it.
Hi.
Leon did it.
It stopped now.
Hi now. No feedback.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
Okay.
We're okay now. Welcome to the group. We are talking about right now. Well, we just finished kind of with the book was and how things that are written aren't really what was brought forth by the tribes and the bands, because it has changed, and every single little group has their own way of telling the stories, whether they be oral or how they got written down wrong. And that's kind of what we're talking about right now. So,
hey, Nikki, just before we get on, in the chat, you have a Mr. Burgles that looks like he is spam bodied your
oh, shit. What happened? Oh, God. Well, somebody is deleted the messages, but I need to get them. Stop for a second so I can delete him. I can't delete him without getting it on my screen.
Mr. Burgers, you're an idiot.
Yeah, you are. Oh, there we go. Oh, come on. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm getting there. Hold on. They make it a little bit harder to get rid of them.
Their mother must be so proud of them.
Oh yeah. He's got like several different hold on. Yeah, you have to keep reporting them. Don't just hide them, but report, and then oops, I almost got Uncle Bones. Burgles is an idiot, whoever that is. Oops. Okay, be right with you guys. I'm going to do this right now.
So how are you doing, Leon Burgos? We never had a problem till you turned up.
I know. And I've been watching behind the scenes. I just had to make sure that my bot program was still activated as I.
Oh my God. Well, you guys just ignore him, I guess. We'll just keep going. You guys are going to have to talk right through him. Just ignore him because I can't keep going on. I got a lot to talk about today. We are going to go to the next topic, which is the Chehalis. And Siatko, the Saskahavis wild man, the fearsome man-eating creature. And the tribes of the Chehalis Reservation is federally recognized tribe located in Southwest Washington. So, and consists of the upper, lower, the Kalalam, is that how you say that? The Muckleshoot, the Nisqually, the Quinault people, many in that area. And
they prefer in Southwest British Columbia, they prefer the term Stehalis.
Stehalis.
Yeah, but this is not the Stehalis. This is the Chehalis of Washington State. Different tribe altogether.
Okay, I'm just going by what I see in the pictures there. That's the Stehalis
Did
there
I mix them up?
Top right, British Columbia, and that's June Green on the reserve in the early 70s when they were looking at those tracks.
The picture down on the bottom there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could have mixed that up. There was a lot of photos I was dealing with. But what the fearsome man-eating creature? I found that to be interesting, how they labeled labeled that Chehalis. Do you guys have any stories in regards to this one?
Well, it seems like
So-
it's a common thread, the cannibal giant thing that
Right.
comes along and eats people and snatches them in the night and what have you. There are
Yeah.
so many stories like that you have to wonder whether or not they're talking about a Bigfoot or they're, again, like I said, just talking about another tribe or whatever. Because it seems like everybody that a tribe doesn't like turns out to be a cannibal giant that eats everyone. It's not
Yeah.
like just running into a big monkey in the woods, you know. It's got to be a cannibal giant that wants to cook you over a fire. So it's
here I have that. Go ahead.
We're dealing a lot here with mythology of the indigenous people. It's like trying to do a study on some European country or something and talk about their influences and what made them who they are and their stories. And, you know, it's Bill would know a lot more about this subject. He has studied it.
And two of the things there, you know, Gerry, to sort of interrupt you, is quite often you have two phenomena when you're talking about a cannibal giant. One is many groups, you can see Europeans used it, you know, in the 1500s, 1600s in their age of exploration to describe tribes. And you've seen where you describe another tribe as cannibalistic, even if you know they're not, but it's an attempt to make them seem subhuman. So
absolutely,
that makes your war or whatever against them righteous because they are subhuman. And
yes.
The other thing you have is the giant myth. One of the ways that you can pound your own chest and say how great I am while appear being modest is you talk about your enemy. And if you make your enemy sound invincible, giant, 12 feet tall, whatever it is, and yet somehow in battle you've managed to conquer them, well, that makes you even a greater warrior. And again, like there's many that say now, or researchers now that say that Hannibal may not have been as great a general as history has made him out to be, and it was really the Romans that puffed him up after the fact to make their win over him that much greater. So again, that's where a lot of these cannibal giant myths may have come from, is A, they were cannibals to make yourself seem better and righteous when you were fighting them, and then B, after you defeated them, and then became giants because that made you a greater warrior.
Wow. So the Chehalis as an Indian word meaning shifting or shining sands. That's interesting. In 1870, the name was changed to Chehalis. What was it before that?
That's a good question. I used to know at one time. I don't remember now.
I don't know. I didn't find that.
They were incorporated. They became a band. I don't remember the exact date, but they were a Stolo band, but they didn't want to be under Stolo control, so they became independent. All the other bands in that area come under the Stolo. So
yeah, there was a large problem back in the day where they would basically take the name of the largest band and apply it to the names of all the smaller ones around. And that was wrong. An example of that is up here in British Columbia, where the Chehalis people are referred to as the Chehalis. And they don't like being called Chehalis, even though the signs just outside the reserve still say Chehalis.
Oh.
Yeah,
we caused a lot of problems. When I say we, I mean early British and colonial when it comes to the coast here, because unlike when you talk traditionally, basically from the Rocky Mountains east, all of Canada is covered under one of 7 treaties. we only had, up until modern times in BC, we only had what was 13 colonial agreements around Vancouver Island, and we never had treaties here. But part of what happened when the British government came is our bands here were, there weren't really nomadic, but you'd have in their territory, they might have a summer fish camp, a spring berry camp, or whatever. And what happened is, whatever camp they happened to be in, when the government authorities came in, they said, "Okay, boom, this is your reservation." And what it did do is, on some bands, it made them impoverished, because it may have been their small berry picking area that might have been, maybe an acre in size. And then other bands that it might have been in their traditional fishing area where they came through. And then the other things that it did is, sometimes you would have, say, two groups that were in one area side by side in two different longhouses that were not affiliated politically. Each longhouse was its own political entity. But when the British came in and said, "Okay, this is now your reserve," and they set up the band system, now those two longhouses that were not politically connected are now the same band. So that also causes a lot of problems when you're trying to look back historically at different, whether it's anything. It's just because of some of this stuff, as well as what you had, the concentrated effort to destroy the culture, that has really mucked things up. So it does. Once you get past, especially the 1800s, it's really hard.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I've got myself all distracted with what was going on in the chat. So, no, it won't move. There we go. So next I have up is the Cherokee. Oh, great. Sorry. We've got the Cherokee, who's one of the indigenous people of the southeastern woodlands of the United States. Prior to the 18th century, they were concentrated in their homelands and towns along the river valleys of what is now southwestern North Carolina, southeastern Tennessee, and edges of the western South Carolina, northern Georgia, and northeastern Alabama. And the Collectule, or the Nunyunui, which is the hairy savage or the stone man.
You get a lot of references to stone men.
Yeah. Once we get to the Stonish, which is the Iroquois, then I've got more of a story about that. But you have a lot saying that they used to roll around in the dirt and the muck, and that it would crust on them and get hard. So hence they thought the stone man. But it's interesting. That's the only photo I could find in regards to the Nunyunwi, and I'm not even sure it was, because it had made other references as well to that photo. And that rock with that saying, I believe that that is the picture with somebody who tried to go over it. It's not what it really looks like, but I don't have any room to put everything. So, which actually said Nunyunwi on there in their language. So they had a pretty good history with talking about the Nunyunwi, but not very many photos or even tribal art I couldn't find for that particular Bigfoot or Sasquatch type related hairy man, stone man. I couldn't find any about that. But now the Cherokee language is actually part of the Iroquois language group, and which was I was finding that out as well, as that the Athabascans, all the tribes moved They moved from different places. So they all have this history together if you go farther back in their languages. So I didn't make a copy of that either. I was going to where many groups share that root language, even though they're separated.
If you look, and I believe west of the Rockies, you had 7 language groups across North America, and that's north of Mexico. And then you had another 6 language groups in BC. And part of when you look at that movement, what you have to remember is just prior to contact, the Iroquois proper were in the process of making an empire. They had actually, just before contact, they had wiped out the St. Lawrence Iroquois. They were at war with the Huron, which is another member of the Iroquois group. And they had actually started expanding an empire, and they were pushing both west and south. And you can actually look, if you look at early maps, you can see where the whole system in North America, the bands were being pushed westward by the expansion of the Iroquois Empire. And a lot of ethnologists believe that if we had shown up 50 years later, 75 years later, there probably would have been an Iroquois Empire on the East Coast. And that also, that point you bring up with movement brings up a good point about when you're looking at things like the hairy man pictographs, is when you're talking 10, 12,000 years, that band that lives there today may have no connection to the group that lived there that made those pictographs.
Right.
Look at the Apaches 500 years ago. They were in Canada. They moved down because of war into the southern part of the U.S. So they'd only been there about 500 years. So anything that's in that area earlier than that, they have no connection to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was fine. I didn't realize the vast land they covered over time. I had no idea about that, and where their origins started from. So that it was great to see all that. Let's see, what else do I have? The Cherokee language name for Cherokee people is actually Andadugawagi, Slaji. Principal people, translating to principal people, because that's another thing I found is that I'm looking up these names of what we call them now, but that's not what they call themselves.
No.
Just like the Navajo call themselves the Dene. They don't call themselves, the Navajo.
All of the plain tribes call, no matter what their names are in their own language, it translates into human being. That's all they know, human being. That's who they are. Wow. Cheyenne, Sioux, Arapaho, it's all the same.
And a lot of their names were pressed on them by Westerners, like Nootka, when that's a band on the Vancouver Island. Nootka, we now think that when their first contact, when they said Nootka, they were actually pointing to their village, and that Nootka probably meant village or dwellings. And then the Europeans thought, no, they're calling themselves Nootka, so that's the title that was forced upon them. The same as like the story with the Eskimo. That wasn't their name, but the Europeans first heard that name from their guide, so that was a name that was pressed upon them. And then a lot of their names are simply almost unpronounceable to Europeans. And there was probably some lazy guys out there saying, the hell with that. I'm not going to try pronouncing that. I'm going to call you Fred.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, my goodness.
Well, isn't that how Canada got its name?
Supposedly, it was from Kanata, which meant village.
Yeah.
Really?
Exactly.
Oh, my. I never heard of that either. Wow.
Yeah. They pointed at it, and then they asked the Anglo-Saxons said, "What's that?" And they called it the village. So they thought, "Oh, Canada. It's called Canada." No, well, it is, but
Blame Canada, blame
Yeah.
Canada. Oops,
Canada.
wrong story. Okay, sorry.
And next we have the Chickasaw, which are indigenous people from the southeastern woodlands of the United States. Their traditional territory was in the northern Mississippi, northwestern and northern Alabama, western Tennessee, and southwestern Kentucky. Their language is classified as a member of the Muskogee language family, and in present day they are organized as federally recognized Chickasaw Nation. And there's a little photo where you can kind of see where they're kind of located at. But remember, once again, many of the tribes had some type of long walk or trail of tears or something where they were forced out of where they were originally and taken to, to other reservations or other areas. But they moved from land west of the Mississippi River to reach present day Mississippi and Alabama. And what was the other thing I thought was really they were divided into two groups, which was the Imosak and the Inchoka. So again, you have one group that gets separated over and over and over, and we end up with that. Let me see what else. Again, I wasn't able to find any references to the lofa, which is their traditional name for the smelly, hairy being that could speak.
Chickasaw.
The Chickasaw.
Chickasaw band.
No tribal art or anything in reference to that. There were stories, but I didn't print all those out. They all kind of sound a little bit generic in just the language of them, of coming across something, and but spirit wise, kind of spirit entity there. And then we have the Chinook, and we were talking about the Chinook, and Thomas, you were talking about that. It is the Skookum, or the evil god of the woods, or the mountain devil is what you were talking about. We, who actually put that mountain devil in there? Was it the translation lost? I don't know.
They tend to talk about the mountain devil and Skookum as two different names.
Mm-hmm.
Mountain devil was, their word for the creatures around Mount St. Helens. And my point always was, well, they had no concept of the devil till they ran into Europeans. So how could they call it the mountain devil?
Yeah.
Skookum was another word that's been associated with the Sasquatch. And that name does go all the way back. But again, was it romanticized and altered? Most likely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with the devil name, because that really comes along with Christianity, and in some cases, when they're talking about a spirit that we call the devil, it may have been an evil entity in their tradition, or it could have been a trickster. For Europeans, you look at Loki. In early Norse mythology, Loki was really a trickster god, more so than anything else. But you can see over time, as the Christians were trying to convert the Scandinavian area, that they basically, over about 1,000 years, Loki went from a trickster deity to more of a devil deity. And you can see that all over the world. So, anytime we say it's a devil, it may have been an evil entity, or it could have been a trickster god that like Nanabozo in the Eastern Woodlands was more of a trickster god that over time became, in some of the Christian tradition, more evil or more malevolent?
The Chinook Indian Nation denied. I was going to go into any of that organizational stuff, but let's see. Some Chinookan people are part of the several federally recognized tribes. The Yakama Nation, primarily Wishram, is that correct? And that the tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation, primarily Wasco. And then the Cathlamet, consisting of the Cathlamet, the Clatsop, the Lower Chinook, the Willapa Chinooks, and the Wacakum. So again, many. They talk a little bit about the French Canadians, also coming in the 1830s and marrying the women, marrying the Indian women. We will move on. Next, we got the Choctaw. The Choctaw. And that are the Native American people originally based in the southeastern woodlands in the now Alabama and Mississippi. Their Choctaw language is the Western Muskogee language. Today, Choctaw people are enrolled in 3 federally recognized tribes: the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians, and the Jenna Band of Choctaw Indians in Louisiana. That one is called the Champé, or the Cachehotapao. The Cachehotapao, Cannibal Man, which is, again, there's that cannibal man. And I didn't, when I was looking and I found the Choctaw Code Talkers, which again took me in this whole other thing I was looking at, because I knew about the Navajo Code Talkers, of course, because I'm from Arizona. But it made me think, oh, wow, there's probably all kinds of different bands of code talkers that were used. But I had never given it a thought. And it was really interesting. Again, it took me into a rabbit hole that I didn't waste time, but yeah, it just definitely distracted me. Very interesting, for sure. And I loved their color usage. Man, they are very bright in their traditional dress. For sure. The next, we've got the Coastal Salish, the Sasquatch, the Sapco. Okay, I don't know if I said that right, but the wild man of the woods, or the one who runs and hides. The one who runs and hides. So this group is ethnically and linguistically related to the people of the Pacific Northwest coast, all the way up to
the Coast Salish. I do believe you can use the reference Sasquatch for them.
Sasquatch?
Yes, because they use that term too.
Yes, because the term is derived from Sasquatch.
Yeah, we're dealing with groups within groups. So,
yeah.
Did they use that term before 1929?
Sasquatch?
No idea.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. They use probably the Sasquatch, or it's a dialect of the Stolo.
That's right.
And makes reference to the wild men of the woods. In the 1920s, Canadian journalist J.W. Burns coined the term Sasquatch as a common denominator for the myriad of native names. Sasquatch derives directly from the word Sasquatch. And what else?
Well, you talk to the Stahalish people, where J.W. Burns wrote that article. It's the best way to pronounce it is Sasquatch. which is
Sasquatch.
basically take the word basket, drop the B, and add SES to it.
Did you ever hear of the term Siatko, Thomas?
Yes.
Because Siatko is another term
Yeah.
that's Chehalis.
Yeah.
Oh, right here it says Sasquatch.
Everybody's leaving. Oh, now they're coming
Stehalis.
back.
Where? What?
Yeah, Siatko. Siatko was another Chehalis word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
References several different groups of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't specify whether it's British Columbia Chehalis or Washington Chehalis or, you know.
So here, the dialect word Saskatchewan roughly means place of the wild man. And it does say here, Saloicum is the Shalaeus mythology, at least for a being of the natural and supernatural world. Saloicum. It goes on and on about the First Nations, but what is this? His legs were as big as tree trunks, she said while swaying her hips and making arm and hand gestures during a recent storytelling presentation at the Lake Connaught Lodge. His skin was as tough as leather and his eyes had a hypnotic glow to them. The monster started chasing the woman through the berry patch. He took his huge, big feet, knocking over every basket of berries, wasting them on the ground. According to legend, warriors from various tribes gathered and vowed to kill the monster. They dug a hole, tricked Glukek into falling into it, and burned him. As Glukek perished, he swore he would return to drink the villagers' blood. As his ashes ascended into the air, they transformed into mosquitoes.
Great story.
Wow.
But you know, it's so
easy.
It's so easy to romanticize something, how it spreads and alters through time. Like, you know, none of us ever come close. Like, I could start one right now. None of us. I heard one man came close to finding Sasquatch once. A fellow by the name of Leon Thompson. 7 foot tall he was, with arms like tree trunks, eyes cold,
That's
like steel.
That's Paul Bunyan.
And a shock of hair.
Shock
of hair, red like a fire in hell.
Yeah. Coming out on Sleepy Hollow with a moose charging. I have a question a bit when you're doing your research. You can hear me okay, Nikki?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I was just kind of curious because, you know, I've heard a lot. I like listening to you guys tonight, especially about this, because people don't talk about this enough, I don't think. And I think you're right, Thomas, the idea about romanticizing it. Like the First Nations in my area, the Silex people, and they don't have a perception of Sasquatch being a flesh and blood creature. They have it as a spiritual creature. And I think that a lot of traditions in First Nations, they're spiritual instead of flesh and blood, or they're a mix between the two. And I'm just kind of curious in our conversation tonight about, you know, any of you guys can jump in here. But it goes back to Thomas, what you're talking about, but that romanticizing, because when I talk to the First Nations directly here, especially at their interpretive center, they always talk about it as a spiritual force, you know, eyes watching nature. Same with the Ogopogo in my area. And they're both very similar, at least to the guys I've talked to here. And not like a real flesh and blood. It's more like a story you would tell your culture that is a moral principle that the culture could follow, kind of thing. And out of this, the tribes you mentioned here, have you guys come across that, or even different tribes where, like, I remember when I first started doing a bit of research too on Sasquatch versus the First Nations, is, you know, some would say that he had clothes, some Some would say, or that they had clothes. Some said they would use weapons. Some say they would start fires, And I'm wondering about that history of that transition between the two cultures. Like Bill, you were talking about so eloquently about, once it gets a hold of a stronger culture, the stronger culture seems to win out on the narration that the previous culture used to be buying into, which makes it a little harder for us to negotiate through what the original stories were that these nations were saying or representing Sasquatch. Because you get Sasquatch in the brain, it's like, well, hairy people, devil man, whatever, you're going to go to Sasquatch thinking that's it, when you shouldn't be doing that in regards to the culture.
Well, as you pointed out, the history is written by the victor, right? So
Right.
as you just pointed out, and I'm a bit of a buff when it comes to the Plain Indians, and Sioux and Cheyenne, Arapaho. They had reference points to what could possibly be what you call Bigfoot. But again, like you pointed out, it was more of a spiritual thing to them. It was a friendly forest entity to them. And it wasn't a cannibal. It didn't run around boiling people in pots and biting their heads off and everything else like that. To them, it was just like many other tribes or bands. It was just a spiritual creature. That's all.
Well, we have to point out the fact that in Caucasian society, we tend to look at things in reality or in that's a better word, supernatural. If you look at most of First Nation oral history and tradition, they don't distinct between the two. To them, it just is.
It is. It serves its purpose.
But even with that, Thomas, when you look prior to, say, 1900, most Europeans were the same way. This real scientific, or what we call scientific approach, really is only about 50, 75 years old for most of the European world and North American. And I would argue that there's a lot of people, you talk to most people of European descent, and most of them are every bit as spiritual on average as any other group. Otherwise, you wouldn't have ghosts and demons and everything else going along. And I think, we go back to the question of spiritual versus flesh and blood, even amongst some of our local bands, like when you talk to some Chehalis, some talk of them as being spiritual, some talk of them being flesh and blood, and some talk about them being a combination of the two. So I think, really it's our, again, it's sort of the Western bent to categorize and label everything, that we've taken a lot of these spiritual, and again, it goes back, and I hate just going back to this, but when you're going to the spirit world, there was a big push, especially in the first half of the 1900s, for Western governments in that to convert the Aboriginals or that to our Western way of thinking, which may have changed what was previously legends of spirit creatures and made them into flesh and blood. And one last thing I want to bring up as we're talking about this, just as I thought of it, going back to the whole naming concept. Sorry, I got the dog going back in and out. Is this whole idea that a word from an Aboriginal language means something. That doesn't have to be anything. If somebody says to you, deer, what's a deer? You picture that in your mind. Deer doesn't mean short-legged moose that lives outside of the swamp. So when an Aboriginal group had a name for an entity or a being or whatever, maybe when they said buckwass didn't mean anything other than buckwass. And we have then said it means this. So if we say, like, again, it's like deer or moose or dog, that doesn't have to have a descriptor. That can just be, it is what it is. So a name that an Aboriginal group has for one of their creatures or myths, that could just be the name. And we as Westerners have put, oh, it means this. It did, or it didn't. It just was what it was.
Yeah, it's lost in translation. That's the problem. Even when you're reading some of these names, Nikki, because when I did my talk in Merit, I had a whole list. I had one page, and I could have added another 150 names.
Right.
But a lot of those sources that people draw from older names, it goes again. English was not that good. There's a good example of it. When people were writing back in those days, spelling wasn't the number one thing, and so you had reporters writing these stories out, and they're writing stories with an idea, and the problem is the idea, like you said, piggybacks on to whatever the topic is, but it doesn't mean the idea fits with the topic, and that's kind of what you're saying, I think, Bill. But because it's confusing, because I wanted to do a lot of research in regards to First Nations perspectives on Sasquatch and stuff, and there's some on the East Coast. Maybe you guys can help me with this one, where some of their artwork they have. I can't remember what tribe it is, though, or First Nations it is, but they have on their artwork on the walls, it's of natural creatures, deer, beaver, moose, and Sasquatch is in that side, and on the other side of the rock is the spiritual creatures they have. They could have put it over on the spiritual side, but they didn't. So, but the problem is to track this down with a culture now that we absorbed, which is whether we like it or not. If a larger culture absorbs another culture, it influences the other cultures and the traditions they have, which blurs the water for us. Especially if it's not our field. It's not my field to be. Definitely not my field to be an archaeologist or anthropologist. Right. So.
Well, it's the same with trying to put the show together, is that I just wanted to show the different names and whatever stories that came up, or, especially with Bill knowing where this stuff came from and how it, more of the actual content. I don't know it. I never studied any of this. I may know a little bit more of the Navajo only because I grew up in northern Arizona, and was around that growing up. But it's hard to consume so much information in such a hard time when it comes to this type of information. So, and I knew that was the case, that a lot of this, I don't know if the information I took or am showing is even right. It's turned around, it's spelled differently, different meanings, different ideas, stories were all over the place. So it was hard unless you are actually study that information and know and have done the research, or have to do with that actual tribe to know what's real and what's not real, what what do I share and not to share, other than we have different names for this creature out there. And do we have these stories because they saw this creature in the 1800s or however far back the tribe came about? The stories, the oral, the pictures, the pictographs, why did those occur? Because they really saw these creatures? Or how did they come about if it was all spiritual? And that's the big question, is that we're given images of this, and how did those images come about unless there was something there, flesh and blood, that they saw?
But
is
in
kind
this situation, you're operating from a shaky platform because you don't know who these people are that you're getting this information from. If you
of right.
hear a Bigfoot being referred to by some Indian band or some Indian tribe, to understand what they're talking about, you have to understand them and their lifestyle and who they are and where they came from and
Right.
everything else about them. Sort of what Leon was saying. Then you can put it into context when you read somewhere that
Same with us talking about
was
Wendigo, the Wendigo, the Wendigo.
exactly,
All
exactly,
we
exactly.
don't know.
You
Just
know,
like this, the one I'm showing here, the wicked cannibal. Here we go again with the cannibal. Is it cannibal? We don't really know. Um, unless maybe you're talking to the elders and they, I don't know, it's kind of confusing when you come right down to it on all the different groups and bands and all this stuff, and we're trying to lump it up into one neat package, but it's really not. It's
No,
not
no,
you can't do that. You can't do that because, again, you have to be able to fit into a culture's brain to understand the culture.
right.
Because you understand our culture, you'll put it onto that culture, and it's kind of like the Aztecs. They don't look at history the way we look at history. They believe past, present, and future is all the same time present. That makes no sense to us because we are systematic with our thinking. Past is back here, future is over here, present is here. But in their culture, it's all the same time. Wrap your brain around what I just said. How in the world could it be all the same time? So you have to be immersed in the culture to understand how that layering would work with your thinking process to come up with the understanding of how they would see the world. And that's the part that I think is, like you guys have all touched on, which is the difference between folklore and also time goes on, assimilated the information from other cultures around the world or around what's ever impacting the topic. And we're notorious for, especially Western culture, for projecting on our ideas, thinking things are something that they're not at all in regards to that culture. I'm trying to think of, if you guys can help me with this. I'm trying to think of things that the white man saw in the First Nations or Indigenous people that they thought was evil, and the First Nations people didn't think of that, or Indigenous people didn't view that as evil at all. Again, for here, it's a bonus.
The potlatch is a perfect example, Leon. The
Thanks,
potlatch, when you look at it, was a sophisticated banking system. And when Europeans came and they saw a potlatch, and I'm going to use some mildly offensive words here because this is historically what they thought, is here they go, look at this crazy Indian giving all his stuff away. We have to protect him from himself because he's just made himself poor. So they outlawed the potlatch. But that's not what the potlatch was. It wasn't somebody putting themselves into the poorhouse. It really was a sophisticated banking system that Europeans just did not grasp the concept. So they vilified it and they made it illegal.
Yeah, I think of another scenario that is with the Inuvik Eskimos. In my era, when we talked about them, was when the white man showed up. Of course, they would play games with the Inuvik people. But the Inuvik people, because of their lifestyle, they made sure everyone tried to survive. So they would play games, Western games. And of course, in Western games, your object is to win the game at all cost. But when they played against people from Inuvik that were Eskimos, they used to make sure that everyone won. So everyone had the same amount by the end of the game, which used to drive them crazy, Europeans crazy, because that's not how you play the game. You're trying to take everything. But their world's totally, no, you can't do that because people will die if you do that. So there's this heavier weight for the Nuvik people than there would be for the Western Europeans popping over here thinking, well, this is just a game. Well, life is not a game to the Eskimos. So
you would love to read Leon, is a book called Kabluna.
Right.
It's have you read that book?
A long time ago.
Excellent book, but it talks exactly about what you're talking about there. If anyone gets a chance, it's Kabluna with a K, and it's really about, I think if I remember correctly, it takes place in the 1950s, and it's a story of a young priest that's assigned to work in an Inuit village. And yeah, there's a very racist view from it because he's coming from the noble savage era of thinking, but it's still an excellent book. I don't know if it's in print anymore. It might be through the oh shit, I forget the name. The first Bible, printed Bible. That
Gutenberg.
project.
The first printed Bible?
The what?
Gutenberg.
The first printed Bible?
Yeah, the Gutenberg project, where they've got all those out of print books in there. So, like I said, Kabluna, excellent story. It has nothing to do with Sasquatch, but if you want to see how two cultures can mistake each other and blend eventually, it's an excellent book. Highly recommend it.
Nice.
And another one is the movie Black Robe. If you ever get a chance to watch it, you will see what missionary work was like with the Huron Nation and the Iroquois Nation, and how they lived and how they fought and how they. It's just a excellent movie, Black Robe.
Yeah, and since you're throwing those out there, another
brutal
one
it was
is
too. Yeah.
Yes, very brutal movie.
Right, yeah, it was brutal. Is the idea of, again, Leif Erikson coming to North America and coming against Sasquatch. This is the Sasquatch interpretation of the chronicles of Leif Erikson and the Vikings when they came over, because they kept referring to the First Nations people as hairy, dark, hairy, evil, ugly-looking creatures because they're Scandinavian. They don't have black hair. And so that whole narration in the Bigfoot world got picked up. This is a few years ago. I think people are hopefully moving on from that whole idea. Was that they were talking about them running into Sasquatches. Well, they weren't running into Sasquatches. They were talking about the First Nations who were here to begin with. And it's just funny how that's why the cautionary note should always be out there regarding people when you're talking about anything is, listen, make sure you know the inside story, the long-term story, the cultural idea of everything, instead of just it being spoon-fed. Boy, my brain's acting up today. The narration you're chronically hearing about everything about Sasquatch. What if we're totally wrong? What if we are totally following the wrong stuff?
Be.
Would that be something? It'd be great.
Could be.
Could be. But now we've got the Oma, boss of the woods, the Hoopa tribe up there in
California. Yep.
Northern California. They migrated from the north into Northern California around 1000 CE and settled in Hoopa Valley, California. Their heritage language is Hoopa, which is a member of the Athabascan language family.
Yeah, and then Pleiades came around and ruined it for everyone.
Oh, God.
Oh, did I say that out loud? Oh, I'm sorry.
You said that out loud. Yeah.
That's okay. I'm already banned from BFRO website anyway, so everybody might as well get a kick at me. Sorry, Nikki, carry on.
You're all good. I'm gonna speed it up anyway because I'll never get through all these. So there you go. You got Oma, and again, I didn't find anything specifically to show you about the Oma. It's all pictures that we've created, especially the ones of today. So it's just orally, that's again another thing that they show. I didn't even find any stories, I don't believe. I didn't write any down, so I'm assuming I did not. The next we have the Otenahed or from the Iroquois, the Stonish Giant. And yes, my friend Joe out in the chat, if he's still around, says that all the time. Otenarhead. And what do I got on this one? I think I had that the Stonish Giants were believed by the Iroquois to be an ancient group of gigantic men who would roll themselves in mud and become stone so strong that arrows would simply bounce off. The Stonish Giants attacked original 6 nations of the northeastern Americas, but after a brutal war, were forced back into the wilderness. The oral legend was recorded and recounted by David Cusick, along with the image above, which is the image in the middle there with the stone guys chasing, with him in the early 1800s. The legends of the sightings in the area continue to be recorded and were made popular by that television show, Monster Hunters. So he published his account in a 28-page pamphlet in 1827.
Sounds like a very primitive tribe compared to the other tribes around them.
Part of me wonders why we associate that with the Sasquatch when it's actually memories of first encounters with Vikings.
Trying to see.
Well, the Vikings, they had more than one encounter with what they call the Skraelings. Mm-hmm. And the Skraelings would attack them every time they tried to dock on shore. Yeah. And they beat them back every time.
I mean, chainmail would do a good thing for for stone if you're, if you're having somebody shoot at you and your chainmail's effective.
Kevlar's even better.
I don't know when this story. I don't want to read this story because I don't know if it's modern or old. It doesn't give no date. Of a creature 10 feet tall and over 1,000 pounds. They were chasing. They sent out to find him to prove his existence. And the Stonish Giant in the back of. They put the Stonish Giant in the back of a trailer. They found a pool of blood and spent shells. They believe took it down.
When was this?
I don't know. See, that's what I'm trying to see. When this came out, it doesn't have any date or anything. It's probably part of the show because I mentioned that monster. Probably that. So done. We will look at the Lumi, the Siamequest, the Lumi, hairy man, and it is a Native American tribe of the Coast Salish and linguistic group. They are based on the coastal area of Pacific Northwest region of Washington State in the U.S. And
just down across the line.
It's where Deputy Sheriff Kenny Cooper made his recordings in 1975.
Yep. Lummi Reservation.
Yep.
I did see a lot about that area tribe. We're trying to bring back the totem poles and stuff like that. There was a lot of articles about that. They were hence that picture on the right there. They were going to put up. They had a ceremony or something to put up one of those totem poles, a new totem pole. What else about the Lumi?
It's good. It's good to see them get their culture back again.
Yeah.
A lot of people took all that stuff without anyone's permission. They just took it.
Yeah, but the Lummi, that's always been their history. Even before the white man came and took it, their biggest fear was was the Haida Gwaii coming down in their war canoes. Which happened quite often too, along with all the rest of the First Nations on the West Coast. I mean, they even practiced slavery, for God's sakes.
Many did.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the bands here had had slavery, and you know, with among the Kwakiutl, you had what was called the cannibal dance. That nowadays it's debated, but you know, traditionally it was that they would take a slave, kill him, and eat him as part of the ceremony. Now, whether that's true or not, it's up to debate nowadays.
Let's move to the Miwok. Spelled Mewok or Miwok, both ways. I found the Awani giant, and it was just the giant. They are members of the 4 linguistically related Native American groups indigenous to what is now Northern California, who traditionally spoke one of the Miwok languages in the Ute family. The Miwok means people. It means people in their language. So, and you had said that before. You said human or something. Didn't you say that a lot of the language just say
they have nothing else to compare it to? So human being. That's it.
Right. Let's see what else I got on here. Nothing. Predominant theory regarding the settlement of the Americas dates the original immigration from Asia through the Bering Straits. Oh no, I don't know all that. It doesn't have a whole lot about the Miwok. Again, I don't have any pictures or anything in regards to. They do have totems as well, and a lot of spirit animal stuff, especially in their tribal art. And they did have a pictograph, that little one up there, which they say is a Bigfoot, but I don't know if that's just how the picture was labeled. And then we have the Navajo.
Hey, babe.
The Yeitso. I've heard it called just the Ye, also the Yeitso, which is the Navajo. Let me find my page here. They are American people of the southwestern United States, mostly in the Four Corners area. And so their name, the speakers of the Dene is how they properly say it, is another Alabaskan language, which they just call the B'nai Bazad. And they refer to themselves as the Dene, even today, meaning the people. Again, the language comprises 2 geographic, mutually intelligible dialects, and the Apache language is closely related to the Navajo language, which I didn't know, because they sound different to me. But the Navajo and the Apaches migrated into northwestern Canada and eastern Alaska, where the Alabaskan speakers reside. And what else did I have? Of course, we had the Navajo code talkers, and that never got deciphered by our enemies. And the word Navajo comes from Tiwa word Navajo, which combines the root Nava, field, and Hu, valley, to mean large field. It's also another, and here we go again with different meanings. I've heard that Navajo actually came from the white man because they were trying to speak Spanish, Navajo, knife, meaning a sharp knife, and calling him the Navajo as the sharp knifed ones. So that's another story, and that one was just told to me. That I didn't look up because I couldn't find it.
Just on a side note, dude, how long ago did you move to El Paso?
Well, we've been here twice, but we moved back here from South Korea in 2013.
Do you speak Spanish?
Sí. Habla español. No habla
That's more
mucho,
than I
pero un
speak.
poquito.
I got to get my Babbel account going again.
Actually, my heritage is Spanish from Spain on both sides of my family. My mom and my dad. So there is that one. And I did find the Yeti. So 2 pictures depicting, well, one is a ceremony picture, and then the other one was a drawing. But they're very big on the skinwalkers too, which is a whole different take. You go into the spiritual end of that shape shifter in that area.
Yeah, this is all really, really a fascinating subject. I mean, I just love this. Great show.
It's kind of hard. When I was gathering too much information at one time, I need to stick to one thing at a time, because I was getting things mixed up, and it's easy to do that. It really is easy to do that. So we're almost here. I'm at my last one, I believe, here, and that's the northern. No, I'm not. I still have 3 more. Northern Paiute people are the Numic tribe that traditionally lived in the Great Basin area region, now Eastern California, Western Nevada, and Southeast Oregon. And they had the Sitka, the people eaters. I don't like that. The people eaters. So Sitka, Saiduka, or Sai are the legendary tribe of the Northern Paiutes fought a war with and eventually wiped out and drove away from the area. The final battle having taken place at what is now known as Lovelock Cave near Lovelock, Nevada, West United States. And in 1911, a large amount of artifacts and mummified human remains were discovered under 4 feet of guano and guano miners in the Lovelock Caves. And I'm going to show you, because this is a very popular photo that has been around of the 1911 mummified remains that were found by those hunters in Lovelock Cave. It's also related to the photo there of the skulls that were found there. Where's my Lovelock Cave? It's right here. So this is a North American archaeological site previously known as Sunset Guano Cave, Horseshoe Cave, and Loudside 18. The cave is 150 feet long and 35 feet wide. Lovelock Cave is one of the most important classic sites of the Great Basin region because of the conditions of the cave are conducive to the preservation of organic and inorganic materials. The cave was placed on the National Register of Historic Places on May 24th, 1984, and it was the first major cave in the Great Basin to be excavated. And the Lovelock Cave people are part of the University of California Archaeological Community Lovelock Cave Station.
Okay, first question. Do we actually know this is a 1911 photograph? So much trickery going on lately with...
Right. Well,
let's go over and see Hairy Man and Hoaxers and find out. I hear she's pretty good.
You're right about that. But in 1911, the 2 miners, David Pugh and James Hart, were hired to mine the back guano from the cave to be used as fertilizer. And so that time frame is correct. in regards to the stuff, but it doesn't say mummy in there. It does not. But it does call the Sitka the red-haired giants. The red-haired giants. Where was I reading that? I don't know. They are. Because I said so. That's Mom 316. Yep, I don't know. But you guys can go search it for yourself. So there. The Ojibwa, the Save, or the Pukwudgies, which we've all heard of Pukwudgie, but it's kind of, we Americanized it to Pukwudgie. It's Pukwudgies. We're going to go through this one fast because then we've got the Okanagan next.
Here we go.
The Ojibwe, the Ojibwa, the Chippewa, the Saltiu is the people in the currently southern Canada, the northern Midwestern United States, and the northern plains. They're an indigenous people of the subarctic and northeastern woodlands. And I've heard a lot of stories about the Pukwudgie being smaller creature, but I never really associated with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but it is translated to wild man.
Most of the legends I've heard about them would be more akin to a gnome type creature than a or maybe even a leprechaun as opposed to a Sasquatch.
Yeah, exactly what I've heard. Exactly. And that picture there in the middle was under a, oh God, what was it under? The Ojibwa tribal picture. But I don't know if it was just something new. It didn't have a date on it or anything, but I found it interesting. I still threw it in there. It looks like he's bleeding blood. Through his eyes. I don't know.
Oh, that one. I was looking at the other one that looks like a one-legged Smurf with sunglasses on or something there. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah. Okay, it's your turn now, Leon. Tell us about the Salish. Salish pronunciation. Oh, it's got a J in it if you pronounce it the right way.
It's my turn. You didn't tell me I was going to say things. Well,
yeah.
They don't believe it's flesh and blood. The funny thing is they've been influenced now to believe it's flesh and blood. They believe it's more spirit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the Okanagan.
The forest. Yeah. And because Okanagan, there's two Okanagans. One's in the States, northern states, and one's in Canada. So it just depends which one. I wasn't too sure which one you're going to load up here, but yeah. So from what I understand, talking to the First Nations here, they believe it's more of a spiritual protector. Same with the Ogopogo, the spiritual protector of the waterways and stuff. Sasquatch is more remember what they call it. Thomas, remember what they call it here? Called
you talking about Ogopogo?
No, I'm talking about the name, the First Nations name here. Like Thomas says, there's like 34 letters in their names. It's like,
good God!
Yeah, you know. So, but
Similicanian? No, that's something else.
I'd have to.
That's a river.
Pull it up right now if I tried, but the other thing too is the watcher and protectors of nature. So Ogopogo or the Sasquatch are more of a spiritual thing there, or a physical thing. That's changed over the years.
First Nation name for Ogopogo was Nahayek.
Nahayek.
Thomas, that's why you're here.
If I'm pronouncing that right, Nahayek.
You do better than I do, that's for sure.
So you've heard of Snena as a name for it translated to old woman, but
Owl
that
woman.
was owl woman. Yeah, owl woman. Sorry. Colville Indian Reservation. Is that up there?
Colville. Now, is that familiar to you guys? You guys are just north of me here.
No.
West of me. Coldstream.
Colville.
Maybe.
It says Colville.
I'll have to check.
And the Silix, is that how you say their tribe?
Silix. Yeah.
The Silix are sometimes known as the Colvilles, according to this. See, probably all wrong.
I heard that.
Seminole, the Esti Kupkaki, Kupakai, or Cupcake. I don't know.
Can we have an interpretation for those tongues? Pick a good Pentecostal
Cupcake,
revival.
anybody? Anybody say?
Seminole.
The Seminole Native American people who developed in Florida in the 18th century live in Oklahoma and Florida, comprised of 3 federally recognized tribes: the Seminole Nation, Oklahoma, Florida, Muskogee. Oh, Masuki. Sorry. And I thought I had something about that. Oh, I do. For centuries, Florida Seminoles called the Esti Kapkaki tall man. Today, they are known as the skunk ape, and Palm Beach County has had its fair of sightings. A shaggy reddish to dark brown hair, stands 7 feet tall, weighs 500 pounds. Miniature, described as a revolting mixture of wet dog, skunk, and rotting eggs. Term was coined in 1960. And what else does it say? That's about it. But who knows? If Matt's out there, is there skunk cakes in Florida?
Matt is still out. He's busy answering that question. He'll get back to you.
Yeah.
I found this kind of interesting. While I was looking through all that, I found Chief Bigfoot. Yes, there is a chief.
Oh, yeah.
Chief Spotted Elk is what his known as a negotiator. Bigfoot, or Spotted Elk, as he was called among the Sioux, was the leader of the Minneconjou Sioux after the death of his father in 1874. He has the tragic distinction of being the leader of the group of Sioux who were gunned down by the 7th Cavalry at Wounded Knee Creek in 1890. And that little picture up in the corner is his frozen dead body. And Gerry has the story behind that.
Yeah, well, he led the people off the reservation at South Cheyenne River in Dakota, I believe, South Dakota. And anyway, the army caught up with them. They're wounded on the river near Wounded Knee Creek, where they they wanted them to hand in their guns, turn over their guns, and go back to the reservation. And they were in the process of doing this when someone accidentally discharged a rifle, and then the cavalry just wiped out everybody. Not a single person left living. Now, this picture always fascinated me for the reason I would think, why is his body in such a position, in such a pose that he froze instantly or something? And what I found out not too long ago was that he was shot in the back by a soldier. He landed on the ground face first. All the bodies were left there overnight till the next day, because they wanted to get the camera people out there to take pictures of the massacre. And when they found out that he was there, they rolled him over onto his back, frozen, and took a picture of him just to show that Spotted Elk was dead. Yeah, and that's why he's in such a weird position. And yeah, he just had the nickname Bigfoot, not because he had big feet or anything like that. That was just a nickname. But a little bit of trivia there, fascinating though.
I heard he was a really good guy.
He was a negotiator between tribes. He was an ambassadorial type. If there was any conflict between two bands, he'd go in there and he'd settle the score with them and, you know, calm everybody down.
Yeah, yeah. That he was trying to make peace a lot. And he's, I wish I had highlighted this big old article here. Bigfoot did not support. What does it say? Oh, anyway, he seemed like a pretty decent guy. This is the Mayak Diktat in the hairy man pictographs that are there in Sonora, California. It's prehistoric pictures and contemporary stories of the Tule River Indians about hairy man, and I just came across them. And of course, Kathy Strain did a research article on that, which just happens to be in the Relic Hominoid Inquiry, which I've been looking at so much that I added it in there because I thought I never knew she even had the research article there. This painted rock pictograph are approximately 1,000 years old.
Were these found in the Stanislaus Forest Reserve where she operates, or were they somewhere else?
These were
I know she's from
found
Sonora.
In the Tule River Indian Reservation.
Okay.
Yeah. And then as I was going along, I found pictographs that were associated with the Native Americans and the indigenous people that were supposedly calling them the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, and all their different names. And I didn't separate them because it was very hard to decipher what they were trying to say about these things. So I just put them all onto the slides so you could look at them. I like that one on the right because it really does show big feet.
What if that's a cartoon? That's
well,
the first cartoon ever done on a rock face.
It could be Uncle Joe. I don't know.
Bugging Uncle Joe about his big feet.
The first time I saw a lot of these pictures was in Chariots of the Gods. So, you know, you got a completely different interpretation of them from a different quote-unquote researcher.
And anytime you're involved with pictographs at all, you better make sure they're actually pictographs from the ancient present, not some con job someone's trying to spread.
No, it's a real thing, Thomas. If you look at that guy you can see. Yeah, you can see that's a Sasquatch. He got a bottle of ice cold coconut in his hand too.
One example I know of was a hoaxer who I will not name, claiming 200-year-old pictographs carved into trees. First thing they said was, well, how do you get a 200-year-old pictograph in a 50 to 60-year-old tree?
But even with these pictographs, Thomas, even if they are, and the majority of these are legitimate, and you know, but when you're talking in some cases 1,000 years, 1,500, or even older, it's the interpretation that's suspect because, as I mentioned earlier, the band there today may not be the same band that was there when those pictographs were made, and may have had no cultural contact with whoever made those. So they may have walked into the area, set up camp, discovered these, and then made a story themselves about it. But then 500 years later, they take as being the truth. Well, we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the greatest example of a pictograph, if you really want to see it, and it's actually probably our oldest confirmed mythological story is the Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime legend and their pictographs. That's probably the one place in the world where you can go back to pictographs that are in excess of 10,000 years old. And we're fairly confident that the story being told about them today is the same as when those pictographs were drawn. And I think the earliest one is something around 37,000 years ago. And again, if somebody's interested in that sort of thing, look at Dreamtime and the Australian Aboriginal pictographs.
I'll give you another example. On the West Coast, I was shown alleged First Nation pictographs on the rocks right out of the ocean. And it was this big story about how this chief was invited to go to England to participate in the coronation of the new king. And they took him, and 3 years they brought him back. And I said, well, that's odd because Queen Victoria was crowned in 1831 and she stayed on the throne until she died in 1901. So in the late 1800s, there was no coronation of any new king of England. So if you're going to make up a story, you better check your history of what you're talking about.
Wow.
Good point, Thomas. Good point.
Yeah, for sure. But so then I came across this kind of picture meme. Oops, now it won't go. There you go. They drew it because they saw it, right? They drew it because they saw it. I just thought that kind of get you thinking, about pictographs, and did they, or is it, without dating the actual rock and everything, we really don't know if Joe Schmo carved into the rock, and but I just thought
Joe
I threw it in
Schmo and
there
his tricks.
because
Well, the thing too
I
is
was
the
looking at
picture on
that
the
stuff.
left there where it says they drew it. Yeah, they drew that, but it doesn't represent the other.
Right.
If you look if you go do a bit of history on that picture, which you can do at home
Right.
for exercise, train
Oh,
yourself,
yeah.
figure out what that's all about, why that's looks that
That
way,
other one.
and what that's all about. So,
yeah,
I won't expound on my great knowledge of that one.
For sure. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Those are all my slides for that anyway. And
Can I just say something here, Nick?
Yes, absolutely.
Anyone who's interested in the history and the study of First Nation history and oral tradition, of course, in the Sasquatch on the West Coast, I recommend this book, Coast Salish Essays by Wayne Shuttles. Talks about the history of the term Sasquatch and its possible connections. And in another book I referred to later, The Transformation of Bigfoot, written by Henry S. Sharp in 1981 about the Chippewa in North Saskatchewan and how their oral tradition of Sasquatch started at the same time as mostly everybody else, when there was a lot of press coverage in the late 50s and 60s. So, yeah. They're very adaptable.
Yeah.
If I might say, for anybody who has any interest in North American Indians and their belief structure and their history, do yourself a favor and go out and pick up Dee Brown's book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. It's the only hysterical, yeah, sometimes it is. It's the only historical book of its kind that's out there that tells the history of North America from the American Indians' point of view about what happened there. And if I can say one thing there, Nikki, I just wanted to say that before we go, I know that Tom Halloran wrote a book called Bigfoot Influencers. I believe he even interviewed Thomas Ford and a bunch of other people. I'm looking forward to reading it myself. But to my way of thinking, the real influencers in the Bigfoot community are people like Joe Schneider, Brent Dill, Sean, Leon, Bill Reed, Pat Turner, Steve, the Curious Cryptic, and Steve Culls, Thomas, and I'd like to think that Buckboss crew plays a small part. And of course, you, Nikki. I wish I had half your energy and drive and your curiosity. And believe me, there's nobody in this racket that you can compare with or who could compare with you. You're fantastic. I wish you all the best of luck on your new little endeavor here, and you will be a success no matter what you do. You just got it, girl. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gerry. I appreciate it. I'm hoping that more people can hear me, and I can keep doing this. It takes a lot of time and I want to keep doing it, but at the same time I want to see growth, I want
Sure.
to keep doing a good job. And it's a lot, I have the time and it's a great, my husband says, my hobby. So I do I do enjoy it. I have a few more things. You guys are welcome to hang on and see the next segment, but it's Leon's favorite. We gotta
Show me what you got.
Jim, you heard them said, show me what you got.
Show me what you got. I want to see what you got. Oh boy.
I love this.
And oh boy, is right. I've got only a couple of things to show you guys this week. A lot of stuff has gone on in the last couple of weeks, but everybody's been talking about it. All the Mike Patterson's footage, the pictures, and a bunch of other stuff that everybody's already got. But I got a couple of new ones. This is supposedly a Bigfoot on the side of the river or whatever river there, the Columbia, Georgia Gorge. And but of course we just see the one photo to the left there, the far distant image. But if you just have to zoom in a little bit, it's nothing. It's really just nothing. But play about your eyes, it's a lot of pareidolia going on there. What?
And you gotta be told what you're looking at.
Yeah. Hey, Thomas.
A lot of good hints on this sort of stuff. When you look at the figure that's supposed to be a Sasquatch, the coloration is the exact same color as the shadow to the left of it. So if you're looking at a circle and whatever they're circling is the exact same color as obvious shadows, then the chances of it being anything other than a shadow is infinitely small.
Exactly.
And also state the obvious that if you have to be told what you're looking at as evidence, it has just been rendered useless, even if it was a Sasquatch. Yeah.
I agree.
100%.
I say no, peoples, no. That was big. Yeah, I'm gonna make them like this or like this now. I gotta go back and do that. The next one. Oh God. Yeah.
Okay.
Satin sheets to
Somebody
lie on, looks like.
likes his lycra. Somebody likes his,
Speedo.
lycra. Yeah. The head kind of has the shape of that. What's it? The lagoon, the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Creature, yeah. Yeah.
That almost looks like Species. The monster, the alien in that Species.
Yeah, sure, Bill.
Yeah.
Is that
But
like
they
a
put it
raccoon
onto
or
a
something
trail
in the
cam.
dark spot there?
I don't
or
know what that is in the dark there, or what he's doing, pooping or something. I don't know. I don't know. No, people, don't even post this stuff, please.
Oh, that must be before he just stuck his head up above the fence and what's his name took a picture of him.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's the approach. That's the approach to the back fence.
There you go.
And this is for Joe. If you're still out there, Joe, I saw this picture and I went, "Oh my God, it's Rasta." With the long curly hair. This is actually a statue at the Monster Mart there in Fouke, Arkansas, and it's a whole Boggy Creek exhibit they have there at that little mart. But I thought it was funny, And
not to mention, it
I'm
proves
like,
that they use curling irons. I mean, look at those curls. that
I
are in
know. I was like,
there.
look
It
at
looks
that
like
lovely
Crimping irons,
curls.
I guess.
My hair used to look
Donna
like that.
Summers.
But okay. Nikki, you need that sound from The Price is Right when somebody loses. Oh,
Yeah.
you mean this one? I got it. I got it. I just didn't want to push the button. So, up. It's time for the next one, and I can't get to it because it's way down here. So on this first one, we have just some real quick ones here today, and it was a question posed by Goshen News, and I think it was out of, oh my gosh, I was going to write it down and I didn't. Where is this place? Shoot. Oscara? Where's Oscara? Oh no, this is the next one. The Goshen News here ran a poll, is what it did. And now I can't read it because it's so tiny. Dang it. Hold on. Give me one moment, peoples. One moment while I pull this up. Oh, great. Okay. And it says, hold on, it's thinking. Okay, so it says, do you believe in the existence of Bigfoot? And this news article was actually by the writer Carson Gerber, talked with the members of the Indiana Bigfoot Research Organization founder Steve Abney, presented evidence that not only is there one hairy forest dweller in the Hoosier State, there are thousands. And there have been Bigfoot sightings in the Syracuse area.
God.
Do you believe it exists? He puts the poll out there, and they said 64% of the people polled said no, they do not believe in the existence of Bigfoot. Only 4% were unsure. 28% said yes, we believe, and 4% said yes, but not in Indiana. So there you go. That is that news. This is the one on Oscara Press. Says Oscara Oswego Chamber of Commerce holds Bigfoot pre-bash. So the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Ohio grassman, there have been many names used throughout the years to describe the tall, hairy beast that has been reportedly sighted all through the United States, gaining traction in the 1950s. And it says here, in order to promote their new event, the chamber held the Bigfoot pre-bash on June 3rd in the Shoreline Players Theater. It then says it's supported by local businessmen and the Elderweiss Tavern. That's good. It also says that when you come up with an idea, you don't really know how it's going to be received or how it's going to come to fruition. This is a great start, says member Marilyn Samra, who brought the idea for the event to the chamber. So they are hoping for economic boost to Oscara by having a Bigfoot festival.
Much like Sasquatch Days in Harrison. Hey, Thomas?
Yeah.
This one is Bigfoot sightings in Michigan rank among top states in the nation. Where did Michigan fall on the list? Michigan ranks at number 8 with a total of 225 documented Bigfoot sightings. Delta and Oscara take the lead with 10 and 11 sightings among the counties in the state. Clare, Clinton, Eaton, Genesee, Houghton, Ingram, Laper, oh my God, it goes on and on and on and on, have reported no sightings. So according to the organization's findings, several other states have also been notable sightings in Bigfoot, including California with 461 reported sightings. Meanwhile, Florida with 339, Ohio with 321, and Illinois with 303. Colorado has 130 sightings. And that's your news. Again, people, a lot of the news has a lot of Bigfoot events, all the conferences and festivals that are going on. And I didn't want to report all of those over and over again. So
I have a problem with who the heck are all of these people that are appearing at all these conferences. And yet, aside from that, I've never heard of most of them before. It's
so yeah. Well, you know what I found is that the East Coast, sometimes they don't mesh with the West Coast.
Oh no, you
they're
found
very,
that out.
they're very different, and even their way of thinking and the way they do their things, so, but it's just okay. Everybody's got their own research,
Yeah.
the things they research and everything like that. But what are we going to do? That's what we got. We're going to use it. So be on the lookout. I've got a couple of things to let you know before we close out the show. And that is Friday night movie nights have been canceled. I know everybody's kind of disappointed. I am too, but it's just too much work, people, to be worried about whether or not I'm going to get shut down for the copyright or not. And even though they're public domain movies I was shown, they're still owned by the studios. So hence I got shut down by Universal? I think it was Universal who shut me down last Friday. So, or the Friday before.
That happened with me too, with Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah.
They decided that they weren't going to let me have it. You know, the only way you can get a movie up on your channel is if you go to YouTube and look it up. If YouTube has the movie, you're good to go.
Yeah. It's just it was a lot of work, and
you'd think they'd like it, but some people would get a chance to watch those crappy little films of theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can buy a license, okay? It is possible, but the way it works is not like you think. You buy a license for $150, $160 to play the film publicly, okay? And it allows you to have, say, 10,000 views for that movie. If something were to happen, I only get 200-300 views, okay? It wouldn't be a big deal. The money's expensive. But what if I hit an algorithm and all of a sudden 1 million people watched that night?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would end up having to pay thousands of dollars to play that 2-hour movie. So that's why that's not going to happen. I'm not going to be purchasing any kind of licensing because I'm not having an outdoor event. Okay. Which is what those licenses were meant for. Is that you can purchase a license for an event if you're having like an outdoor theater type of thing. Then you can do those type of things. But on the internet, it's very unpredictable. I mean, just look at Brent showed one movie and he got like, thousands of people,
almost a million views.
Yeah. Heck no, I'm not going to pay thousands of dollars for a 2-hour movie. It's just not worth it. So it is possible. You can buy a license, but not in the way I want to use it. And so Friday game night is probably going to happen if everybody wants that to happen. Not every Friday. I'm thinking one night a month we will have a game night, and I will sponsor it, and I'll come up with something fun for us to do on a Friday night. So what do y'all say? Yay or nay? Thumbs up or thumbs down? I don't know. We'll see. And to let you guys know, I am going on vacation starting on the 18th. So there will be no show next Sunday. Yay! No. So you might see me do a rando live, wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing, but not a sit down, show. But whew.
Are you still going to that thing north of in Washington in July?
Yes, I am. Are you kidding me? There's nothing that's going to pull me away from that now. And he is talking about the Mount St. Helens Sasquatch Shindig, July 26th through the 30th. On the side of Mount St. Helens, where Jay Birch, Michael Gallagher, and myself are hosting a dry camp out situation. You have to find your own transportation, bring your own gear, your own food and water. Anything you pack in, you have to pack out. Okay? Is no restrooms, people. This is just out there in the boonies next to the mountain. So but anybody is invited. Just have to let me know. My contact is harrymanhoaxes@gmail.com. My tickets are purchased, Thomas. I will be there for sure. No turning back now. But thank you, gentlemen. Gerry, you got anything coming up?
Maybe next Thursday I'll do a 15 or 20 minute podcast on influencers and what influencers really are and what they're supposed to be and what they're not and what have you. Mm-hmm. But that's about it for this week.
Nice. How about you, Thomas?
Well, first of all, I'd like to give a shout out and a thank you to Gerry for recently transferring all my old VHS tapes I haven't looked at in decades onto jump drives. By the way, was it the case of just the wrong jump drives, Gerry?
Don't tell them.
Okay.
No, I did. I gave him the wrong thumbnails. And then I was thinking, how stupid can you be? You can't operate a thumbnail. But no, the original ones were at home in the living room, of course. I gave him 2 blank ones.
And here I was for hours thinking, geez, what am I doing wrong? I can't find
anything. Oh, my goodness.
But one had them, and I've been posting some of the old stuff from back in the 80s and 90s.
It has been great. What a handsome man. Look at you doing those interviews. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, totally.
Yes, I was
great fun. Oh, great, Thomas. So,
Leon?
Yeah.
Everybody. You got anything coming up? You got anything coming up?
In the background that I'm going to come up that's going to cause a lot of problems, I think, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, we all are. We're waiting.
Well, it's gotta be done right. So I gotta wait.
Yeah,
it might be
that is true.
3 months, but I gotta wait for everything to unfold correctly. So, but yeah, I hope to get people just kind of thinking, I guess, instead of let's just drink everything. Everything everyone says. Let's just drink
the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
I want to know.
Go ahead.
Also, before I forget, Gerry, are you going to bring back Monkey? I miss Monkey. Hey, Bill, you got anything coming up? You going to be doing any podcasts?
No, I don't do podcasts. I just participate in them. And tomorrow morning, I'm flying out to Quebec for the week for work. So, I'll be busy with work all week, but no, I join Gerry if he has a podcast. But I'm not doing anything myself. So yeah, not a lot.
You're wise, Bill. That's what you are.
Wise. You guys have to go and watch the Bookwas crew of BC, and he's got episode 96 is hilarious. It's what the ladies want. It is hilarious. You have to go watch that. Oh, and there's Monkey.
For the record, I hate monkeys.
Put him up more. I can't see his face. His face is adorable.
Yeah, totally.
I think he just hit the button with monkey.
What happened?
He just
I didn't freeze him. He froze himself. There we go. Oh, that's great. That's great. But I hope to see him soon. And everybody, thank you for being here. Hang out in the back so I can thank you again. Everybody, thanks for being here. If you like the show, hit that like button before you leave and share it around to your friends. Tell them you like me. Tell them. Just do it. And we shall see you guys in the next chat.